Today I'm gonna follow this list here and work on these things. Not sure how much I'm gonna be able to do, but yeah, I'm just gonna work on this stuff. Or maybe we should do a different branch to do this. Let me go back. I'm gonna go back and commit the delete that I did there. So I'm gonna have to think about this stuff later. So I think that the way that I'm gonna implement search, there is two different ways that I was thinking about it. But the last thing that I thought about it is that I should just look into the way that I did with the edges, because the thing is that I think that's gonna be better to create a new attribute or a new value, and it's probably gonna be on the nodes object. And then I was contemplating whether or not I'm gonna have to change a bunch of stuff that I already did, because when I change the value, so the idea that I have is just to create a search input. I'm not gonna worry too much about the CSS. I'm just gonna try to implement the functionality, because I know that these kinds of things are like very annoying to implement the CSS from what I remember in the past. But what I'm gonna try to do, and like the filtering, I'm gonna try to do search and filter, but the filter for the graph I think is gonna be like outside. There's also another stuff that I'm gonna talk about now that I remember that's gonna be harder, but first let me talk about the search. So the search I'm thinking about putting here outside of the custom options. So put above, maybe above the current options, but then below the camera mode. I don't like that this is like very close there, so I'm gonna have to change this, but I think I'm gonna worry about the CSS later, like I said. So I'm just gonna put search here, and the way that I'm thinking about it implementing is just when you type, it's gonna be an input, and then when the user types, I'm just gonna search for the graph and I'm gonna highlight the nodes. So the highlight's gonna be changing the color. But the issue, like what makes it challenging, and this is gonna be like a very challenging thing as well, like across the board, that I'm gonna have to think about. Because the main thing that I'm thinking about is to extract information using colors. because I think that's gonna be very helpful. So the biggest problem is that if I do things like that and I allow people to customize, then it becomes very hard because, for example, now if I change the colors of the edges here, I lose the information that I have for that I was using to highlight the edges. So for the edges, I think it doesn't matter that much because it's not the main focus of the thing. Like what matters more is the color of the nodes to represent the information. I think if I change the edges, if I do it like that, like maybe it's not the best, but it doesn't matter that much. But for the nodes themselves, then it's obviously gonna matter. So if I change the color of the node when I'm highlighting, which I think this is another challenge. Is like I have to think about a color that I'm most likely not gonna use on the other stuff. So like a default color, and maybe that's should be white, but I'm not really sure. Like I have to think about a color that is kind of intuitive for other things that people use. When you search, that is gonna highlight, it's gonna change the colors of the nodes to that color. And then the problem is that if I change the color on the object itself, then I lose the information of what the color was originally from the node. So when the user like removes the search, then obviously I want to go back to the previous color. And this is another thing that's gonna be difficult to see. I'm gonna have to think about this now. So like, how do I go back to the previous one? But then I remember that I did on the edges, and I think that because I remember that I was thinking about the same thing on the edges, and then I realized that I didn't need to create another color just to hold the state, because I was changing the color on the mesh itself from 3JS and not the color on the edge object. So I always have the original value if I want. And I think with the nodes is the same thing. So what I'm gonna do is just copy the way that I did here for the nodes. So I access the mesh based on the object, and then I put the new color. So I'm gonna probably put an attribute here for the nodes. That is gonna be the color, like the highlight color. So the first thing I think is figuring out what color should I put. Maybe I should search for, see if I can find somewhere like some useful, maybe ask ChatGPT first. And I think like implementing the search itself is probably not going to be hard. The way that I'm thinking about it is just looping over the nodes and then checking the label. So you loop and then you check to see if the label contains the string of the input or not. And based on that, you change the color of the mesh. So the trickiest part is going to be to go back to the previous color when they erase the inputs. That's the thing. But I think that I can just check. Like I think that the last time I can check if the input is like empty or not. But I'm gonna console log first, and then I'm gonna type stuff, and then I see like what is gonna happen when there isn't anything on the input. I don't wanna pick. The thing is, like, I don't wanna pick. And there's also this. There's just several things to think about. So I don't want to overwhelm, because I think I want to allow flexibility, but I also don't want to, like, as the default option, I don't want to put too many colors, because then it gets confusing. But I should choose a standard for colors, or color palettes, and then obviously it should be base, like the most fundamental stuff should be on colors that are fixed first. So for example, like red instead of light red or dark red, or a gradient, stuff like that. So like, the things that happen most often should, the main colors should be reserved for the things that happen most often. And then I can use the same colors as standards. So for example, here I chose light blue for functions because there's so many other stuff. But maybe it's a bad idea. Maybe I should just put like blue, just normal blue for functions. And then I should try to keep that standard, because then like once you learn the colors, it becomes a lot easier to remember what each thing is. So then obviously the types of visualization is going to be related to the colors. So maybe I should choose like white for highlighting, but I think white doesn't look that good. I was thinking the main thing as being red, because, or green. Maybe green is better for highlighting. Maybe I should choose like a color that is like unlikely that people will use. Makes more sense. That way they have the freedom. So like instead of choosing one of the main colors, I just choose a variation, and then I check to see with the. So I think I'm gonna choose one of the, like the ones that I already have here. I'm gonna choose a contrast of one of those that I have. So for example, if I choose green, I choose a darker shade of green or something like that. And then I can see like through the contrast if it's gonna be visible, the difference. And that way I can still use the other colors. I think that's a good idea. I'm gonna choose green because I think that green is either green or yellow. Probably is most intuitive for people, I think, when you highlight. Maybe blue as well, because when you highlight text is blue. But I think for the graphs, probably better green. I'm gonna go with a shade of green. Just searching for a site that I can choose the thing. I didn't like this much. Yeah, maybe this stuff here. The other tricky thing is that I'm using a warm color on the monitor, so it changes the way that I perceive the colors, and this is a annoying thing as well, because then if people have like brighter monitors or they change the configurations, it's gonna change that the way that they perceive. But obviously, like you can't, it's not gonna be, can't please everyone. I think the most difficult part is gonna be the allowing customization. That's the trickiest part, I think, because then I have to allow customization in a way that is not gonna affect the main thing. That makes sense. But maybe I should allow to customize everything. And so I should probably have like standard colors for each thing, and then I'll allow the customization for each one, but then have a default. So I think obviously I start with the default first because it's too much stuff to worry about, and maybe only later on I'm gonna do this stuff. The other thing that I was contemplating is like what I said in the previous stream, that I should be more 50-50, one or the other, where 50% of the time I do something that I think is more useful and you can see right away, so I can share on Twitter and share on YouTube, and then start seeing if people use more the website to see like if I'm building is useful or not. and then 50% of the time I spend on things that are more fundamental and more long term. And then I realized like the reason why I'm spending the reason why I think it's worth spending time on the fundamental stuff or the stuff that I'm doing is that I'm building something that I want to use myself. Like and this is the thing that I was talking about before, which the reason why I thought that it may be a distraction to think about the other stuff is because the place I'm coming from is not from the place of trying to get users so much or trying to build something. Like I know that if I'm able to put the vision I have in my mind on reality, I know that this stuff is going to be useful because I know the challenges that I face, and like I'm building the stuff based on like what I want to have myself, which is just going to make it a far more effective for me to learn code. And then the idea is to use that thing to learn everything faster. So this is the reason why I think that it is worth spending on the fundamental side. But after thinking about it like for a while, I think that for most people, if you're building something, it's probably a lot more worth it to spend most of the time on the stuff that is like superficial, let's say, that you can put it right away. So I would change my strategy a lot, I think, if I was building something else. So let's say, for example, I was building a Chrome extension or something like that. I think the best strategy is to always like use a high-level language, use a dynamic language, and just like try to iterate as fast as possible, and just put as much content as possible out there, so you can see, so you can gauge if the stuff that you're doing has traction or not. And then based on that, you go back to the fundamentals. So once you figure out like product market fit, then you go back to the fundamentals. But because of the nature of what I'm doing, I think that doesn't make a lot of sense. I think it's much better to... But I still think it makes sense to do stuff on the high level, because then it allows me to see like what kind of challenges I'm gonna have when I'm building the stuff. I think like the main example of this is the size of the graph, because knowing that the graph gets lower at some certain points fundamentally changes everything that I'm trying to do, because then I have to break down the stuff that I'm doing so that it works. Like on the more fundamental stuff, once I come back to the more fundamental stuff, I'm gonna have in the back of my mind like, oh, I can't really build the graph this way, I can't really extract the information this way because I have this bottleneck on the front end. So now I think that's, yeah, just open the main configurator thing here. This is something I also have been thinking about, and I don't understand. I know that the libraries, maybe it's because of that. Maybe I should look into this as well, actually. Because I know that the main libraries, like I think you should have Chakra UI, and then have Tailwind and other stuff like that. And I think those main libraries have their like components built into them. But I think that I'm not really sure if they are paid or not. If I have to pay to use the components, maybe I should look into that more now. Because the thing that I'm thinking about is that like it should be fully automated already. Like for 80% of the part of building a website should be automated already. I don't see, like, it doesn't make any sense to me to have to recreate things, because like it's stuff that is not going to change too much. Like a button, there's going to be variations, but there's usually a standard for the buttons. And also, like, I don't understand if people... I assume that a lot of people do, but maybe that's the reason why they don't want to like run data analysis on the different styles and cross-correlate that with the engagement, conversion, and retention, let's say. Or these different metrics that you can put. I assume that people do that, but maybe they don't make it available because they like it's valuable information, so they don't want to share, which would make sense. But I assume that it should, like, someone should do this already, like figuring out what are the standards of buttons and color palettes that are the most optimal, and then maybe like you can even make a business, I think, out of it. So, or just a product where you condense all this information into like a package that you can see like like what are the best defaults for building the style of everything, and then you just create the components, and yeah, you wouldn't have to spend a bunch of time thinking about the CSS. So I think that I'm gonna ask ChatGPT, maybe Chat. I'm gonna ask the main libraries, and then I'm gonna search. I don't think that this stuff's very important. Like, I don't want to spend a bunch of time on this, but I also understand that like it is important, but it's just I don't know. It is something challenging as well. And I think everyone has this challenge because in the beginning, like, it's not that the making the site look legit is hard. Is that you need a lot of business stuff behind the site to make it legit, and that's the hard part. Like you need the like terms of condition, the cookie thing, and then you need a bunch of different features so you can build a bunch of other stuff like on the navbar, a bunch of options, which is usually stuff that you take for granted when you're using. Like you don't realize how many features there are behind it and how complex is the backend to handle all the data and all this stuff behind. But then because of the nature of the way that things are, everyone expects these things when they're using the website. So when it doesn't have a lot of features or it doesn't have that, then people think it's fishy. But then like the way to get around this, I think, is either to use like some 3D visualization or something like that with 3GS or some other library, or use images and videos as well. But then that's the problem, because like this is the question I have in my mind, the challenge, because the more time you pass on this kind of stuff, like the less useful the thing you're building becomes, because then you don't have time to actually build the value. So that's why I think that's probably a lot better to build the value, but then it's like a trade-off. It's very hard to do everything by yourself. But I think I'm gonna focus like fundamentally on the 100% of my time on the value first, until I get to a point that at least have like something that I think is very useful. And then once I get to the point, then I iterate. But it goes back to the stuff that I was saying before as well, because I think if I was building something different, I wouldn't even worry about iterating if I wasn't getting traction. But I think this specific case, I think it is very worth it. Like I'm going to go all the way, I think. At least for the vision that I have, because I want to use this to learn everything else. Yeah, Material UI is the other one that I... So it's Material UI, Chakra, and... I think Tailwinds is the one probably everyone uses. And the thing about Tailwinds is that I don't know if they have components or not. Just trying to think. And I think all of these are paid to a certain extent, but I don't know how, understand very well how the payment works. Like when, because there's some stuff that is free, I think it's freemium, whereas a part is free and the other part is paid. And I don't want to spend the money. I'd rather build the stuff myself. Obviously, if I have a bunch of money, then I would just buy it, but for my situation, it doesn't make sense.
Life is all about you, and not at all about you.
I'm gonna open the 3 websites and then
Thoughts, and yet both of them
go back to the thing.
How can you experience everything
So I'm just trying to, I'm gonna like superficially search for this stuff here so I can, so I see if I can find the, I know that Chakra UI has a very, they have very good components for one type of style of page that I wanted to build, which is more for the user, that allows you to put a bunch of, to display a bunch of data based on the components. So the main one that I'm thinking about is Chakra UI, but I think it's paid. Like you have to pay to use it. So initially, I think it's probably better to just spend a bunch of time making this stuff better and then make all the components myself. And even like if it looks like shit, as long as it doesn't look like too much like shit, then I think it's fine. And then once I got to the point, if this scales, if I get users and if I get the conversions, then I can reinvest the money into getting these libraries here and then optimizing the other stuff. But I think the core fundamental thing is the value first, because otherwise, like, nobody's gonna use it. And I think that this is a philosophy that most people that are successful have, which is like the marketing is secondary. The main fundamental priority is the product, because the best form of marketing is word to mouth, or however you say that, when people talk about the stuff that you're doing. But then obviously it's not that marketing is not necessary, it's just that it is more of like a byproduct of, you don't want to market a shitty product. And if you have a good product, then it's just organic. Like people talk about it and then it's free.
My destiny is perfectly aligned with this location. I am the map, so I travel back in time.
Yeah, this like pricing.
Imagination mine, but mine is not enough for me.
Maybe I can just start on the free plan and then.
I could see it all, but never get to see
But I don't understand how the plans work pretty well.
be it all, but all identity.
What exactly do you get?
The moon is only bright as it reflects the sun's shine.
Maybe it's just a couple of components you have to pay and the other ones are free. Not sure if Tailwind is paid, but I think that this is the thing, Tailwind's like, I think it's better for some situations because it allows you to have more flexibility. And the thing I didn't like about Bootstrap is that it forces you to use, and like the defaults they have are pretty shitty, in my opinion. So the thing that I like about Tailwind much more than Bootstrap is that it allows you to create your own stuff. It is very good, but I don't think that they have like standard components that you can use, but maybe I'm wrong. And then the downside about this is the stuff that I have to see, because if I go this route as well, the downside is that a lot of the times like it becomes very hard to change the functionality of the thing. So just to a certain extent, the library has to put in place like assumptions of how you're going to use the thing, because they create the components and then they create the styles, and then they're going to determine what they receive as props, and then based on what they receive as props, they're going to put the functionality, and that's the downside. Because then if you want to change the code, you have to go, you either download the source code and then you put like on your project and then you change it. I think that's the only way actually, because if you change on the library itself, it doesn't work. So if you want to fundamentally change the thing, it doesn't work. You should just ask ChatGPT. Maybe I should search for libraries as well in React, but again, it's the same problem. And I want to try to avoid that as much as possible, I think, which is just to download a bunch of libraries. The more dependencies you have, like the worse it becomes in the future, I think. You lose flexibility. But it's always like a trade-off, so maybe I should. Because on the color picker, I just use a library, and I think it makes sense. So maybe the search is the same thing. Because it's something that is not so hard. Like if it breaks down or for whatever reason stops scaling or like something happens, then I can just build myself later. So I think maybe it's worth it to just look for one. The biggest problem is that search is going to be directly correlated with like the algorithms that are going to be behind the search. That's the reason why I think that's going to be hard to find. Because I think it's going to vary a lot based on the case.
Every day, I wake up, I see the sun. I see the moon, I see the stars. I see the
There's the annoying thing about using CSS Tailwind now is that I'm gonna have to change everything. I think like all the CSS. I don't wanna. Maybe it's because of the nature of what I'm doing, but yeah, trying to think. If I was creating another project then or doing something else, like which direction would be better to go? And I think probably the best direction is to choose one and then to build a bunch of standard components yourself. And then once you have those components, then you can just always reuse the stuff that you have built. So like you spend a bunch of time creating like a fixed template for a different structure of websites. The main thing that is going to change between websites is going to be the stuff back on the back end that is directly correlated with the front end, because I think that it is a funnel of information. So like every pixel on the front end is related to the whole funnel of the way that the structured information is going to be converted on space-time. So for like providing the value of the application. So the main variance is always going to be on the back end, I think, and the biggest challenges, because it's going to be related to the scaling of the data and the different places that the code is going to be deployed. And then on the front end, there's going to be variance, but it's more related to the limbic system, I think. This is the way that people perceive the page, and that is going to be directly correlated with the friction they have for conversions or for whatever different thing you're going to do. But this is why it's kind of related. I think between this Chakra and Material UI, probably I choose Chakra because of the videos that I saw before. I really like the style of the page that the guy did. And he was using Chakra. So I'm just gonna trust my intuition and go with Chakra if I decide to go that. Probably not gonna use Tailwind as well, because then I have to change everything. I don't wanna worry about that. Like I said before, I think it's because of the nature of what I'm doing. It's not worth it to. I should just like implement the easiest solution, like the brute force solution first for CSS, and just not worry about the style of the page at all, and just focus fully on fundamental value. And then once I create the stuff that I want to use, then I think about whether or not it's worth iterating, because maybe I just leave like that as well if I think that there isn't like product market fit. Because I'm gonna use this stuff anyway to learn all the other stuff, and then I can build more stuff later if it doesn't work. Should also look into the... Maybe shouldn't even spend time looking at the component, like trying to find the component. Just ask ChatGPT to create one, like a simple one, and then I put the visualization. This is just gonna be an input, and then you receive the value based on the on-change thing, and then with the value I create the functionality. It's just not gonna be that hard. The hardest part of the stuff that I wanna do, which I probably should right here, is I want to build a simple, not a simple, but something related. Oh, this is the stuff that I was talking about before that I realized that it's going to be hard, which is I'm thinking about creating something that is similar to the way that it works here, because then it allows me to have like an infinite amount of space. Because I can create like main sections that represent different kinds of things, like different kinds of graphs and different kinds of customizations and stuff like that. And then for each one of those things, I can create the similar logic that I did here. So theoretically, I can like increase obviously it's not going to be infinite, but I can increase a lot the amount of stuff I can put, the customizations. But the main challenge for this is that I just remember that the reason, like, it's going to be very hard to integrate this component here with the stuff here. Because for this stuff here, I'm thinking about it, I'm going to do it outside of the graph component itself. And this stuff here, I had to put it inside of the graph component because all the values here are directly, like they are changing the stores, and the stores are inside of the component. So like I can't access the Zustand store outside of this component here. And I have to access the store on the component so I can change the values. And the reason why I can't access the store outside is because I use the stuff on the documentation that I think is, I forgot the nickname of the guy that I asked the question on their Discord. It was Boy Mendres, I think, the name. I don't know how to say it very well, but the Discord, I think of the people that created React Refiber and Zustand and other stuff, and the guy pointed me to a page on the documentation that explains something with injection. I forgot. Dependency injection. Yeah, that's the name. So the way that it works on dependency injection is that it allows you to create separate instances of the component of the store. So the problem that I had is that I didn't want, let's say I have multiple different graphs, for example, on the website, I don't want the states of the graph to be connected. I want to isolate them on their parts. So I'm still creating, like, I still have to use context because the context has to work for the difference in components. Like different components have to have access to the state, but I don't want the state to be visible to the whole application, because then if I have multiple different graphs, if I change the state of one graph, it's gonna automatically change the state of the other graphs, and that's very bad, I think. So I wanted to like encapsulate the scope, and then they recommended me to use the dependency injection pattern, which they talk about in the documentation of the Zustand thing. But then the downside of this is that for this component here, it has to be like trapped inside of the graph component. Otherwise, I can't change the state. So the issue with that is that I want to build the other component outside of the graph component, because the other component is going to be more related to the creation of different graphs and not the customization of the graph itself. And also other stuff potentially related to like files and stuff like that. So the challenge is, how do I merge the two? Like, how do I put this inside of the other one? And then obviously, like the easiest thing to do is just to use absolute, which is what I'm doing now. Use absolute position, and then just make it seem like this component is inside of the other one. But that's like, I'm concerned that this is gonna be bad. So if it is bad, then I just leave like this, and then I create two different ones, which is probably what I'm gonna do, because I think it's a good compromise just to have this button here that I can like hide. Because then it doesn't matter that much, it doesn't take space, and this is the stuff that I talked about, this CSS, which is not worth thinking about this. So I think that probably I'm gonna do it like that, because here is just already good enough. And yeah, the other one I make it separately, but I'm gonna put there as well. Put here. So I have to add, and then the filter is gonna be on this other component, because the filter also, I realized that it's better to make it related to I think it's better to make it related to the part that is external for the graph. So that way, every time you filter, it creates a different graph, instead of making it inside of the thing, because then if I make inside of the thing, then I have to create, I was thinking about it, creating another state, let's say, that would hold the selected nodes, which was the way that they were doing before on the library that I copied. And the issue with that is that then it adds a bunch of stuff, I think. It adds a bunch of complexity, because then you have to manage everything else, like the highlight colors, the customization, everything with the selection as well, which I don't think is very good. It's like much better to put it outside, and then I just recreate the graph based on filters, and also like allow the limits, like people to change the limits and stuff like that. There are several different things that I have to do. So add search, add ability to filter, add ability to do pagination. So which one should I do first? Yeah, I think that the pagination is probably like later. So maybe I should just do like here. Create ID like components. The hard part about this as well is that maybe it's a good idea to just create a space where like it shows the code. I think I'm gonna do that. So the same way that it is like an IDE or like on Code Sandbox or other websites like that. But instead of allowing people to modify the thing, I just display whatever the file has. But the issue with that is that, and that is a big problem because then I have to have a backend, then I'm gonna have to send the data and then like create the file, like read the file from the backend. And then I can use serverless functions, but the downside of the serverless functions is that if I deploy on Vercel, there's going to be a limit, and I'm going to have to keep in mind of the limit. And it's like very annoying to do it like with JavaScript because of the sizes of the things. You have to create a file stream and stuff like that. Probably have to create both of them. Maybe not actually. I receive as JSON from the backend, and then with the JSON I just format. I just put as text on the thing. I think that works. So the main reason why I'm doing like this is because I want to avoid having to think about sandboxing the user and adding a bunch of complexity on top of what I'm doing already. But eventually maybe I'll decide to go back to allow user input, because then you have to think about like all the potential ways that people can try to hack the thing, and it just gets a lot harder in the beginning. So I think it's better to just display as default. Display the code that the file actually has instead of allowing people to modify first. So maybe I'll ask ChatGPT. Yeah, I'm gonna search for this later. I'm gonna ask ChatGPT and just gonna build the input, the search input with ChatGPT. And this is gonna be very hard, I think, to build the CSS and everything. So yeah, focus on the other two first, then I'll worry about that. I'll be right back. So maybe it is better to just focus on, instead of spending a lot of time on the compiler stuff, I think it's probably better to just spend more time now on trying to create, like with Python itself, because it's, with Python and using the libraries that Python has, it's gonna be easier to just break down this stuff. I think it is important for me to finish the stuff on C that I'm doing, the compiler. But I think I should probably try to build at least something that I think might be useful with Python first. And then once I have, yeah, the idea is probably to like finish doing this other stuff that I have to do, the IDE, the search, the filter, and maybe pagination. And then after I have like this template, because I want to be able to see, I think it's a lot better if I'm able to see the project on the side as I travel the graph. If I have pagination, for example, and if I have files, like, it's just a lot better to do side by side. So I think that's the first thing that I have to do. Then once I figure that out, then it's probably better to just try to implement something on Python that allows me to, I want to see if I can build something based on the way that I was thinking about, like remembering the challenges that I had, and like how can I create something that is gonna make it easier for me to understand. I think once I'm able to do that, then it's gonna be a lot easier to solve the other stuff, because then I'm gonna be able to see like a clear path for building the thing. Maybe this is open source. They have a Discords as well. I think I should probably look into this later and just go with the easy solution now. Just ask ChatGPT to create a simple component. Yeah, I'm gonna make another thing here. I should put config search, because I'm gonna have other types of search, I think, on the website. And then I'm gonna put this stuff. Let me think. Maybe I should just, I shouldn't be copying this. I should just copy from ChatGPT. Then I make the changes. That's probably better. When I search for whether or not Chakra is open source. I think there's 2 different versions, probably. Yeah, I think there's 2 different versions. So it's the same as the other ones. It's like a premium. You have some stuff on the free one, and then you have a paid one. Yeah, makes sense. But I'm curious to know, like, how does it work with the paid one? Like, what exactly are you paying for the license of the thing? Like, they give you the source code and you're only allowed to choose if you pay, or if it's some another way. I'm probably gonna go with Chakra UI, I think. But maybe later. I think you pay for the license and then they probably give you the source code. I think the other option would be that they give you the code after it was compiled. But obviously, like, you can still reverse engineer, I think. So, like, it's kind of inevitable for people to have the code, I think. Whatever. So let's ask ChatGPT to build the thing. Oh, this is another annoying thing about search, but I don't think I'm gonna implement that, which is just the suggestions. Fuck, maybe I should do that. Well, I remember I saw on a library as well. When I was studying this to build the graphs, there was a library that did exactly that had the search. I don't remember if they had suggestions or not. Debounce. I forgot what debounce is. It's obviously, I remember vaguely like what it is. It's a difference when you receive the data and when it shows up, something like that. But I don't remember really well. The issue here with this stuff is that so many options and it's kind of hard to know the trade-offs and all that stuff. I'm just gonna ask you build some. It's probably the best option. Because then I don't have to worry about the bullshit. So the biggest question is gonna be whether or not, like, how much flexibility am I going to have? Like, what are the default props that each component receives, and how much I can change? How hard it is to change. Maybe for what I'm doing, it's probably better to stay wind. But probably a combination of the two, as always. Using class. The best is gonna be, the best for CSS I think is gonna be And I think maybe the libraries don't have that, so maybe it should be good for someone to create that if it doesn't exist. So like something that allows you to create stuff like you create with Tailwind, where you put the actual CSS in the class name itself, that allows you to customize, and at the same time has default components like the other libraries. Because for some parts of the application, I think would be better if for example, the navbar or buttons or main page, stuff like that. I think it would be better to just have the components from one of the libraries themselves, because then it's just easier, don't have to think about it. But then for other parts that are related to the graph, the IDE and stuff like that, I think those parts is probably better with Tailwind or something like that. Because then it's likely that I'm gonna have to like customize stuff based on what I need. So I think it's directly related to the variance of the data, which one you should choose. And it's gonna be a gradient. There's gonna converge towards infinity because it's gonna is one of those things again. There's just a relative polarity, so converges towards infinity. I'm gonna redo this so that it shows me like the code. I'm just gonna do it with the way that I'm doing CSS now, and then I'll worry about this stuff once I have everything else figured out. So I'm just gonna ignore this bullshit. Oh, the other thing I can think about is the events as well. That's gonna be like I should think, but I think this is probably later once I already have the other stuff. It's more related to the direct, like way the visualizations work. I'm just realizing that this is kind of bad now as well, because I put canvas here. Like the name should be something else, or it should separate, because I blended the two of them together. I think it should just be configuration instead of canvas. I'm gonna change and see if it fucks up the thing. It's probably gonna, I hope it changes everything. I think it's searching to see where it has, and then it's gonna change. Hopefully. So I'm gonna create another CSS file here and just replace and then delete the rest of the stuff. Or just copy from ChatGPT. Should I put the submit here? Probably not. Because there's nothing I think like everything that is going to be related to changing the graph itself, I think is going to be outside of the other component. So I just use and send the information, but maybe there is something. But that's probably but up there. As I click outside. I don't know why. I think that the microphone does some annoying noises, and it seems like it's not catching now. But there's nothing I can do about it. Maybe I'll use the other headset that I have there. It looks like it's not working. Well, it's probably because it's trying to. I don't have permission because it didn't open the VS Code with the stuff. So I'm gonna do that later. Fuck, I don't know if it's catching my voice or not. There's also another thing that the other library had, which is lasso search. And as far as I understand now, the lasso allows you to like select like this, the nodes. So you click and you hold, and then it selects everything. But I think I'm not really sure. It's probably gonna be too complicated because I want to put other events. So maybe it's not a great idea. But I'm thinking about whether or not like there's something that's if it's better to allow the submit button or not. But I should probably just put there and then just do the same thing for now. That's the handle search does. To just like maybe create another function here that changes the nodes, and then I call the function inside of the two different ones. So I'm gonna copy the edge config thing. I think I'm gonna put on another function. Since I did function the other ones, I'm gonna change these ones as well. Hey man, 14 years old, I want to start this category of AT. I want to go to high school on math, informatic. I think the college after the high school is going to help me. That's a very difficult question. I think it's worth it to go. Like you need to understand the college is trash. It's like absolute garbage, and the fact that we still have colleges like highlights the systematic issues we have, because college itself is dumb as fuck in the current state that we are. So like what would be much better than college is like a kind of like a website that is the same thing as college but is virtual, where like you learn everything by yourself and then you pay dependent on how much do you need help. And then all the exams are done in physical, in presence. And then you have like mandatory classes, maybe 3 times a week or whatever frequency you want, that forces everyone to talk to each other that are signed up to the college. So that way would be much better, because then you wouldn't compartmentalize the people into their own categories and everyone would talk to everyone else. That would handle the like connection that people have, like, because the main point that people say about college, that the reason why it's good is because you get to know people and socialize, but that's really dumb because you can just do the other stuff. So like the biggest reason why college still exists nowadays is because of bureaucracy and corruption. Those are the main things. And I think it's mainly because of bureaucracy, but there's a lot of corruption as well, because like it's not in a lot of people best interest to allow you to learn things faster, because they're thinking from a scarcity mindset. So the way that most people work and operate is under that mindset, where because it's like a consequence of your biochemistry, like your subconscious mind, instead of trying to be the best version of yourself, most people are trying to put everyone down so that they are on the same level. And because of that, they don't want to incentivize people to be better, because then like it puts them on an uncomfortable position. And that's probably one of the biggest reasons why college still exists. Like it's very inefficient and stupid, but at the same time, like you are inserted in the system. So if you don't go to college, you're gonna have like a very high risk, because it's gonna be a lot harder for you to find jobs. So it's really gonna depend on the situation you are right now. I think for the overwhelming majority of people, it's still worth to go to college, but have a proactive mindset. Like, don't wait for college to learn stuff. Just think about what you want to do and start trying to build the stuff that you want to do. Like, try to follow the direction you want to go, regardless of college, and just do college like just to get the degree. And if you're gonna do it, just make sure you choose a degree that it's worth it. And also, if you have to pay, then like I would probably not go. I would just do like build stuff. I think that's probably the best approach, but I'm not really sure. It's very hard to, like, I can't tell you what to do. Like, you have to think for yourself. But yeah, all I can say is just I can say my experience and the way that I think, but then you have to be very careful, because your situation is going to be very different from mine. So heard of Camp IT. I hear a lot of people didn't help the school, so they go in that type of camp. Yeah, boot camp is not very good, I think, either. It depends on what kind of person you are as well. But I think it's just like, yeah, I don't think it's worth it. You can learn everything by yourself. Like for me, like the best approach is just, like to do what I'm doing now. It's just like learn everything and learn everything by yourself, and then post on social media the stuff you're learning. If you don't want to make videos, just post stuff that you build and post on Twitter, post on LinkedIn and stuff like that. Every time you do something, you just post, and like that way you show how much you know. But at the same time, like the downside of the approach that I have is that I dropped out of college, so I don't have the degree. So like it gets a lot harder to find the first job. But it's just because of a systematic like issue, because yeah, it really pisses me off that college is still a thing. And like a lot of people, but I think that's the hard part about this is that like because they're 14, like in 4 years everything can change. Like it's because of the pace of how things are going, and especially in tech. I think especially in tech, if you're gonna build something, then I think that's really dumb to go to college or to do a bootcamp. It's just like learning on your own, and then if you are having challenges, then just pay like a mentor to teach you, like pay some coach or something like that. But then again, it really depends because it's hard to find, and I think that I wish someone built the solution, but there hasn't been anyone that builds, I think, anything like that. So Java, Python, or C++, I think that's again, it depends on the level of challenge you have. Like, are you naturally talented to understand this stuff? Like, are you good on mathematics and the logical thinking, or you're more for the other side of the equation? Like, if you're very good at understanding computers and you have a decent like fundamental knowledge, I would start with C++. But if not, start with Python. And I think probably for most people, it's going to be in between the two. So start with Python first, like get the very first, but then make sure that right after you get the like main things, you go to C++. I think learning from the low level is a lot better, especially for if you don't have to get a job right away. And learning from lower levels is definitely better, because then it's gonna force you to have good habits from the start. I think the main problem that I have now is that because I learned from Python and JavaScript in the beginning, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it might be the case that I got some bad patterns because I wasn't aware of the fundamental stuff. So definitely lower level I think is better to start. And also did like I'm not really sure if it's gonna be useful or not, but on this other channel here, I did a video that teaches you like JavaScript and Python at the same time. And on that video, like I explain like the main things you should look for, which is this video here. So I would look for keywords, like look for all the important keywords. And some keywords I forgot to put on the, not that I forgot, I just didn't know about them, but now I know. But I forgot now, like, let me think about it. But there are a couple of keywords. Oh, instruction set architecture. So this is another important keyword. Instruction set architecture. And then the other keywords that I have here. And then once you get those keywords, then you explore what each keyword means, and then you like see how things are today based on all the other stuff. So I would go Python first, then once you know the superficial stuff, go to C++. Then if it gets too hard, go to Python again. Or JavaScript. It's probably JavaScript better, like JavaScript first. Then once you know the superficial, then go to C++. Then if it gets too hard, go to JavaScript again, and then go back and forth until you understand everything. And then in the meantime, create a graph with the fundamental keywords, and then explore each keyword and try to put them together like on a coherent vision of how everything is connected. I'm good at math, but I tried Python and it's hard to me to know so much commands. Yeah, don't focus about knowing the commands. Focus about the fundamental. Because like nowadays you have access to abundance of information. So it's not important for you to memorize anything. Just focus on understanding the fundamental principles. Like, what are the core principles of programming, and then from that you derive everything else. Like, you can search everything else, and it's gonna come with experience. The more you use, the more you're gonna know. At least that's how I think, but you should be careful because everyone has their biases, and like, I'm not sure if the way that I do it is like the best way objectively overall. So it's just my experience. I could be wrong. There's also this function here that I use because, but maybe on the other one I don't need this one. Because on the other one I'm receiving the color as a hex, and I think that for setting it needs to be on the, okay, maybe it disconnected because of the music, so I'll have to see later. I think I'm gonna do the same way that I did the other one, and yeah, because I'm gonna receive the colors in, like, the nodes are gonna have the colors in. Oh, but this is a problem. Well, maybe not actually. Yeah, I don't think it's not gonna be a problem because I'm gonna change the colors on the material, not on the mesh, not the node object itself. So I'm gonna receive the color, like the first color is gonna be on hex, and then I change to, which is gonna be the node color. Then I change to RGB, and then I change the other thing. Actually not, because I'm gonna use the highlight color. So maybe I could put in RGB directly. That's probably easier, so I'm gonna do that. And then I don't have to run the function. So I'm gonna put a comment there. I'm gonna put the color in RGB. I'm gonna search for a translator for this. I'm not sure if this one works. It doesn't matter. I'm just gonna put this one. Oh, actually, yeah, this is another thing I have to see. Because there is a difference in the way that RGB is and the way that I receive there. Because here, I think that, like, for the 3GS stuff is between 0 and 1. So I think it's probably better to console log first. I'm gonna console log when I change the edges to see what kind of value I'm getting. And once I have that, then I go back and I see if I put. I'm probably gonna put on RGB first, the color, and then here just pass the node highlight color. Which I'm creating here. It's gonna be here if I. I'm also gonna have to console log this stuff, so. On the directed, I don't need. Or maybe I lost the connection because I changed the YouTube channel. So. Oh, here receive the search pattern, and I'm gonna pass as target the value here. So, what was I doing? Oh yeah, I need to put this stuff. I need to put this one on inside of the other one, inside of the configurator. I probably put here. It blows my mind, this stuff about college, about how, because like, and it's gonna get more and more ridiculous because we have AI, so AI is gonna get better, better and better, and people like, most companies are still hiring based on the degree, which is fucking stupid. But like, it makes a lot of sense because like, how are you gonna see if the person has the skill or not otherwise? And it's a very hard problem. And it's the same stuff that I talk about on the How to Learn Anything video about the challenge of figuring out if someone is skillful or not to do something. But I think that the direction that the things are, and maybe it takes a long time, but eventually I think someone will create something like this where it's just a machine learning model that trains itself based on the gap of skill to challenge, and then it figures out based on that if a candidate has the skill or not. And I think it's gonna be more and more about, I still think that there are gonna be physical exams because it standardizes everything, so it becomes easier to see. Like, the downside of what I'm doing now is just creating like digital assets to represent how much you know, which is just my YouTube channel. Like, someone can go into my YouTube channel and see everything that I did, and then they can assess my level of skill based on the stuff that I did. But then obviously the problem with that is that if you have 2,000 candidates, like, you're not going to spend a bunch of time like looking at all the videos, and then people can lie about it, obviously. So just suck. I'm gonna have to stop and just go for. I'm gonna see see if I can finish this. But what I was saying is that, like, the downside is that if someone goes to my channel and they see like all this stuff that I did, it's gonna be hard for them to. So that's because like people can lie, they can put any title they want, and then like the only way to really verify is to look at the videos. That's the main difference between what I'm doing and the college degree, because the college degree allows you to have like, is a trusted source that is gonna qualify, is gonna work as a filter. So what matters is the source, like who is doing the verification and how credible they are, like what their reputation, like have, like allows you to make something more efficient to know if someone is capable or not of doing what they're doing. So that's why I think the physical exams are always important, But the issue, like, and this is the thing, is that like instead of having like forcing people to take classes, you should just do the exams in person. Do the exams physically, and then allow people to learn at their rate, because like it's so stupid that you have to go to a physical place, and then if you go to a physical place and try to see, you can't like just watch 15 minutes of a lecture and then decide whether or not you like that. And it's also like there's too many assumptions, because people force you to fit into a box that clearly the universe isn't. So this stops people from becoming specialized on different things. So for example, the cross section of biology and astrophysics, for example, like it's gonna be very hard to create a course just about that. So what's gonna happen is that it's gonna become more rigid, and then because it becomes rigid, people like you lose a lot of talent and power that people have, because they're not going to be able to specialize in their own unique ways. So it would be much better to have a platform that works kind of like a video game, where you have your stats, and then you do the exams in person, and then depending on the hierarchy of the exams, so for example, if you have calculus and advanced calculus, and you do the exam for that and you pass, then it automatically unlocks your skills that are required to build that knowledge in the first place, which would be a challenging thing to do, because then you have to assume the connections like of importance of each thing. So you need to learn linear algebra to know like quantum mechanics, for example. So that's obvious, but then there might not be so obvious relationships. But the point is that you would create a website that allows people to train themselves based on whatever is their interest, and then unlock skills based on physical exams they do. And then for each physical exam, you pay a fee, and that's how like it becomes a lot more efficient. But then the reason why it's not like that is because of the whole like systemic issue. So like from the individual perspective, it makes a lot of sense to go to college, because if you don't, then society punishes you. But the problem is that society is dumb, because all the systems are corrupted and slow. And then because AI advances exponentially, it just dominates everyone. And that's what's happening now, and it's very hard to, and I think this is the reason why a lot of people like are having a bunch of challenges now, because it's very uncertain, like things, and like everyone is clearly not prepared, and like yeah, so like eventually I think like what's gonna happen more and more is just AI become better and better, and then like all the regulation systems are not efficient, and then like eventually either things collapse or AI takes control. But I think that the response to that is probably the best possible option, course of action for everyone. I think is try to create a blockchain that evolves in the same rate that AI evolves. So pretty much automating the regulating process, and that's gonna have to be grounded into a multifactor pattern that takes into the consideration the complexity of life, so that it doesn't become biased to any other place. And that has to be integrated on the hardware itself, so that so it's fundamentally connected with the structure of physics. And I think that there needs to be a fundamental property on the physics level that determine this distribution of power, otherwise life wouldn't be possible. Because space-time itself is the dynamic of the relative polarities interacting with each other. So if there was too much chaos, nothing would exist, and if everything was too rigid, nothing would exist either. So time itself and space-time itself is the distribution of the two, which is the frequency of computation. And that creates a multifractal pattern, which is the illusion of perception that a network has, which is the essence of space-time, I think. So the regulating structure of power has to be grounded into these multifractal patterns, so that it doesn't become a vicious cycle over time. And I think that's the problem with the market economy, because everything becomes like concentrated because people are slow, and then AI gets powerful really fast. And then the key question to see if it's going to be catastrophic or not is going to be, how does the AI determine the boundary of itself? Because that's going to determine its strategy and how it's going to use its power to shape the environment. So the boundary of the self of the AI has to be directly correlated with the complexity of the universe, because it has to be inversely proportional to the amount of power it has in order to be sustainable in space-time. So I think that has to be the case, and there has to be something that is possible to do like that, because otherwise space-time wouldn't exist. But the downside of that is that we don't want to, part of us don't want to do that, because then you have to sacrifice yourself. Like you have to sacrifice your personal goals because of the structure of the whole. And I think everyone's desire is always going to be to maximize whatever brings them the most power, because that's the essence of their biochemistry. And this is the problem with bots as well, because the problem with bots is that It's not the quantity that they increase, like the mass bots that they use, is that they're amplifying an identity that is not scalable. And that's the problem of human beings. Our identity is not scalable, which is the reflection of our biochemistry, because it is not coordinated enough on space-time, because there's this paradox of knowledge, where the surface of the electromagnetic field is going to dictate the complex of knowledge and information, and it becomes unpredictable because then like you lose the meaning of the centralization of the identity itself if you decentralize. So it's like always the balance between the two. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to do this. I have to go do some stuff off stream. So I think I'm gonna finish this off stream, but I'm probably gonna have to change the title. But what I'm gonna do here is pretty simple. I'm just gonna put this component on the other one, and then I'm just gonna do this stuff here. So I have the highlight color, and then this just loops over the node. Then based on the pattern here, if the node label is equal to the pattern, then I change the mesh to be the highlighted one. And the tricky part is gonna be what happens when there's nothing on the input. And I think when that's the case, I just put a return statement here. That I'm gonna check to see that if the search is empty, or even here, yeah, probably here. And then I'm not really sure how I have to think about it. Maybe in the function makes more sense because I'm gonna use on both things. So if it is empty, it doesn't do anything. But if there is a pattern, then it highlights it changes the color of the nodes that have that pattern. And maybe I should check if the node already is on the color, or if the mesh already is on the color, because then it saves the computation. But yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. And then later, after that, I'm gonna create the filter outside. Then once I think about the filter, then I'm probably gonna focus on the ID. And I think I'm gonna focus more, like 80%, 80% of my time now. I'm gonna focus on building this stuff first, because I think that it is more important to have this, like the overall template and the stuff that I wanna do, like especially the IDE, I think, because it's gonna be hard. The IDE, and I think it's gonna be very useful. And then once I figure this out, then I go back to focusing more on the fundamental, like go back and forth, until I have something that is actually useful, that I can see like in practice how it's gonna help me like learn more stuff. So, but I'm gonna stop here. Maybe I'll come back